Starting. Uh, Good morning, all my dear students. In the last three classes, we discussed about the face, parietal gland, scalp, and these are all outside the cranium. Today, we are going to enter into the cranium. If you enter into the cranium, there are different structures you are going to see. Here, inside the cranium, basically the part of the cranium which covers the brain is called neurocranium. Already you know that the splanchnicranium, that is the bones which are forming the face. Here the neurocranium, it includes 8 bones. That is the two paired bones. Thank you. Two paired bones, that is temporal bones, and two parietal bones, and two unpaired bones, that is occipital bone, frontal bone, ethmoid. These are all the bones that are taking part in the formation and the sphenoid, especially body and greater and lesser wings of the sphenoid bones. That is, paired bones are two, that is parietal and temporal bones on both sides, and unpaired bones are four. That is in front, frontal bone, behind, occipital bone, and in the base of the skull, there are two bones, that is ethmoid and sphenoid bones. Total 8 bones that are taking part in the formation of the neurocranium. Okay, just like our pericranium or periosteum, which is covering outside the cranial bones, and inside the cranial bones also there is a covering that is called endocranium. The endocranium, it is nothing but the one layer of the dura mater, that is the toughest of the 3 meninges which are covering the brain. The dura mater, which covers the inside the cranium, is called endocranium, or it is also called endosteal layer of the cranial bones, or we call it as periosteum of the cranial bones, inside the cranial bones. And next, coming to the what are the different parts of the cranial cavity? That is the cranial cavity. For our convenience, we are dividing into 3 parts. That is, the first one is the anterior cranial fossa, next is the middle cranial fossa, next is the posterior cranial fossa. And these cranial fossa, 3 cranial fossae, are not in the same plane. They are like a steps. Anterior cranial fossa is in the first floor, and middle cranial fossa is the ground floor, and posterior cranial fossa is like a cellar. That is the location of the 3 cranial fossa. And within this cranial fossa, there is a different parts of the brain they are accommodating. That is, suppose if you take the anterior cranial fossa, that is the frontal lobes of the cerebrum, and if you take the middle cranial fossa, it is providing accommodation to the temporal lobes, and if you take the posterior cranial fossa, it is providing accommodation to the small brain, that is nothing but the cerebellum. Along with this, the occipital folds of the cerebrum, they are also accommodated in the posterior cranial fossa. Like that, there are 3 cranial fossae. They are present in the inside the cranium. And here, the cranium is like a one room with restricted space. Here within the cranial cavity, there are 3 substances, 3 most important substances. They are accommodated. That is, number 1 is the brain. That means neural tissue and nervous tissue. And next is the blood. That is the tissue which supplies the nutrition and oxygen to the brain. And another one is the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. These are 3 most important components of the cranial cavity. They are adjusted with each other according to, that is their demand and their requirement. If there is any increase in the one component of the cranial cavity, and there is automatically there is decrease in the another component of the cranial cavity. Suppose if there is a increased in the blood, that is CSF accumulation, that is the hydrocephalus in the ventricles of the brain, what happens? Automatically it occupies more space because the cranial cavity space is limited, and it affects on the other two parts. It may compress on the brain tissue, or it may compress over the, it may cause compromised blood flow to the brain. Because of this reason, it produces its own manifestations like vomiting, headache, giddiness, like that. These are all the increased intracranial pressure symptoms. Okay, because of this reason, the cranial cavity is very important, even though there is a small tumors or any benign tumors. But mostly we see the malignant tumors are more dangerous than the benign tumors. But in the cranial cavity, because of the restricted space in the cranial cavity, these are, they are called benign tumors, they are called SOL, space occupying lesions. The space is the problem here. In the cranial cavity, the most problem is with the space. There is no chance for the expansion. Suppose if there is abdominal cavity tumor, the abdomen may extend, there is no problem. There may be little bit discomfort, but not like the cranial cavity, because it is covered by a rigid neurocranium. Okay, because of this reason, the space is the most important part in the cranial cavity. Okay, next coming to the cranial cavity, in the cranial cavity, and because of to avoid overlapping or postural compression over one part of the brain or the other part, there are some partitions. They are in the form of dural folds. They are called dural folds. There is a, what are the dural folds, and all these things we see. First, basically, you see what are the coverings of the brain, and these coverings of the brain, that is, they are called meninges. Coverings. These are the three cranial fossa. You see, this is the anterior cranial fossa, and this is the middle cranial fossa, and this is the posterior cranial fossa. Here, this is the area it provides accommodation to the frontal poles of the cerebrum, and this is the temporal poles of the, or temporal lobes of the cerebrum, and this is the area it provides accommodation to the cerebellum, and over this area it provides accommodation to the occipital poles of the cerebrum. Next, the brain is covered by three layers, already you know, that is the three meninges. Out of these three meninges, the dura mater is the outermost layer, and it is the toughest of all the three layers. That is why it is called dura. Dura means tough, durable, that is tough. Because of this reason, it is called dura mater. And next is the arachnoid matter. Why it is called arachnoid matter? It is like a spider net. Spider net, that is why it is spread like a spider net. That is why it is called arachnoid matter. Next one is the pia matter. It is a pable. That is a very delicate membrane. It intimately connected or intimately adherent to the brain substance, surface of the brain. And this is the pia matter. These are the three folds of dura. That is, outermost is the dura matter. Next is the arachnoid matter and pia matter. Okay. Next here, this dura matter, again it is having two layers, divided into two layers. That is, one is the endosteal layer, the outer layer, and next is the meningeal layer, inner layer. Here, the inner layer of the dura matter, it is folded on itself, and it is taking part in the formation of the folds of dura matter. The folds of dura matter are four in number. That is, first one is the falx cerebri, tentorium cerebelli, falx cerebelli, and diaphragma cellae. These are the four folds of dura mater, and each fold of dura mater, it is having its own importance. We see the dural folds. Okay, you see, this is the schematic representation of the dural folds, and this part is called falx cerebri. It lies in between the longitudinal fissure, along in between the two hemispheres of the brain, that is called falx cerebri. Falx cerebri. Okay, it divides the, it is related with the two medial surfaces of the cerebral hemispheres. Next is the, another one is the, another fold is, this fold is called tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium cerebelli. It is a sickle shaped fold. It is a falx cerebri is a sickle shaped fold, but here the tentorium cerebelli is like a tent like fold. That is why it is called tentorium, tent like fold of dura mater. That is why it is called tentorium cerebelli. And next is the another one, why it is covering the cerebelli. That is why it is called cerebelli. Why it is called cerebri, falx cerebri. It is in between the two layers of the cerebrum, two lobes of the cerebrum. That is why it is called falx cerebri. Okay, next another fold is the small fold. You can see here, this is the model I prepared. You see, okay, you see, this is the falx cerebri. Okay, in between the two folds of the two lobes of the cerebrum, and this is the falx cerebelli, tentorium cerebelli. This is the tent-like. The orientation is like this. This is the tentorium cerebelli, and below this tentorium cerebelli, there is a small fold of dura mater that is called falx cerebelli. Falx cerebelli. It is a very small fold, and this is the base of the falx cerebelli. This is called apex of the falx cerebelli. Okay, and this is the tentorium cerebelli, and here this is the falx cerebri. Falx cerebri. These are the three folds of dura mater, and another fold of dura mater. There is a very small round fold of dura mater, which covers the body of the sphenoid bone, or the body of the sphenoid bone. There is a depression that is called hypophyseal fossa. Hypophyseal fossa. It is bridged by a fold of dura mater that is called diaphragma sellae. Diaphragma sellae. Like this, there are three folds of dura mater. This is the coronal section taken at the posterior part of the cranium. That is, it represents the three folds of dura mater. That is, you can see, this is the falx cerebrum, this is the tentorium cerebelli, this one, and this is the falx cerebelli. Okay, it is the falx cerebelli is a small fold of dura mater between the two lobes of the cerebellum in the posterior part. Two lobes of the cerebellum. And next, coming to the in detail about the falx cerebri. That is, a falx cerebri is a sickle-shaped fold of dura mater and occupying the median longitudinal fissure between two cerebral hemispheres. The cerebrum is divided into two right and left cerebral hemispheres. In between these two cerebral hemispheres, there is a one sickle-shaped fold of dura mater that is called falx cerebri. And here, what is the most important function of this falx cerebri? It prevents the displacement of the two lobes on different postures of the head, and it prevents the compression over the one lobe on the other lobe. Okay, that is why this is the most important function of the falx cerebri. And next, what are the parts of the falx cerebri? You see, it is having two ends. That is, you see here, this is the anterior end, and this is the posterior end. Here, the anterior end, and it is also having two margins. That is the superior margin or upper margin, and this is the inferior margin or lower margin. And it is having two surfaces. That is the right surface and left surface. Right surface, left surface, superior margin, inferior margin, anterior end, and posterior end. Here, it is providing accommodation to the dural venous sinuses. You see the blue line along the superior border. You can observe along the superior border. Here there is a blue line. It represents superior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus. And in the lower part, also you can see here there is another sinus, blue line. This is, it represents inferior sagittal sinus. So it is called sagittal. It is in the sagittal plane. The sinus is present in the sagittal plane. That is why it is called superior and inferior sagittal sinus. And another one is the striate sinus. Here, the posterior end of this falx cerebri, it is attached to the superior surface of the tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium cerebelli. Along this line of attachment, there is another dural sinus that is called striate sinus, because it is striate in course. You can see here, blue line. This is the striate in course. That is why it is called striate sinus. These are the three dural venous sinuses which are having relation with the falx cerebri. Okay, here you can observe this is the fold of dura mater, that is the falx cerebri. Okay, this is the anterior end, and this is the posterior end. And here this is the superior border. Along this superior border, this is the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, and this is the inferior border. Along the inferior border here, this is the inferior sagittal sinus. Here the inferior sagittal sinus is not extended all the length of the inferior border, but it is occupying only posterior from here, posterior 2/3 of the inferior border of the falx cerebri. Posterior 2/3 of the inferior border of the falx cerebri. This is the another sinus, that is the inferior sagittal sinus. Inferior sagittal sinus. And then you can see here, this is the posterior end of the falx cerebri, and this is having a straight attachment with the tentorium cerebelli. Here, this is the site for the straight sinus. Because it is straight in course, we call it as straight sinus. Okay, and here the anterior end of the falx cerebri, it is attached anteriorly to the one bony projection that is called crista galli. Crista galli, it is the bony elevation of the ethmoid bone. On both sides of this bone, there is a cribriform area. We see later while discussing about the bone. We see what is the cribriform part and what is the crista galli. All these things. For just time being, you just remember the anterior end of the falx cerebri. It is attached to the crista galli. Okay, these are the attachments and borders, surfaces, and relations of the falx cerebri. Okay, you can see here also, this is the if you remove the 1/2 of the brain from the cranial cavity, and this is the picture you can see in the cranial cavity. Okay, this is the falx cerebri up to here, and this is the straight sinus. This is the inferior sagittal sinus, superior sagittal sinus, and here this is 1/2 of the tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium cerebelli, this one. Okay, next to here, another one is tentorium cerebelli. This is also another important fold of dura mater. With the help of this tentorium cerebelli, it divides the cranial cavity into two important parts. That is below the tentorium cerebelli, that is called infratentorial compartment, and above the tentorium cerebelli, we call it as supratentorial compartment. Okay, that is the most important function of the tentorium cerebelli, and at the same time, it also prevents the compression of the occipital poles or occipital lobes of the cerebrum, heavy cerebrum. And compared with the cerebellum is heavy in structure and weight also, because to prevent the compression of the cerebrum over the cerebellum, this tentorium cerebelli is necessary, and it is playing most important role. At the same time, it is dividing the cranial cavity into two most important compartments, that is the supratentorial and infratentorial compartments. Okay, that is the most important function of the tentorium cerebelli. Next, coming to the what are the different parts of the tentorium cerebelli. It has two margins, that is anterior margin, that is a free margin, and it is attached. Another margin is the attached margin. That is, you can see here. You see, this is the anterior, posterior, or attached margin. This is the attached margin. You can see here, and this is the U-shaped. You can see here. This is the U-shaped free margin. U-shaped free margin, and this is the attached margin. Attached margin. Okay, this is the attached margin, and this is the free U-shaped free margin. Here, the superior and inferior surfaces. That is two are margins. That is free and attached margins, and surfaces are two surfaces. That is superior and inferior surfaces. Okay. First, you see about the free margin. What is its importance? The anterior free margin. The anterior most part of the free margin, it is attached to the anterior clinoid process. What is anterior clinoid process? It is a bony prolongation or elevation in the anterior part of the jugum sphenoidale. That is the there is a fossa, or there is a depressed area in the over the body of the sphenoid bone. We call it as jugum sphenoidale, and the anterior part of this one, it is that is under lesser wing of the sphenoid. It forms a bony prolongation that is called anterior clinoid process, and this is the site for the attachment of the there is a free margin of the tentorium cerebelli. It encloses the tentorial notch, that is called tentorial notch, and here through this tentorium, through the free anterior margin, there is a communication between the midbrain and the hindbrain. And this is the area, it is having relation with the midbrain and the superior vermis. That is a part of the cerebellum. We see what is superior vermis while discussing about the neuron anatomy. Next, coming to the attached margin, it is a convex. That is, free margin is concave, or it is U-shaped. But it is a attached margin is convex. Anterolaterally, it is attached to the anteriorly, it is attached to the posterior clinoid process. This is also another bony prolongation from the body of the sphenoid and petrous part of the temporal bone. That is the temporal bone. That is one toughest part of the temporal bone. That is a box-like area. That is why it is called petrous. And this part of the temporal bone, it is providing attachment to the, that is attached to the posterior part of the, anterolateral. It is providing attachment to the this posterior, that is attached margin, and posterolaterally it is attached to the, there is a groove along the occipital bone along the both sides of the internal occipital protuberance. Here the internal occipital protuberance, it is a small bony elevation just like our external occipital protuberance. There is a from this there is a, on both sides of this there is a sulcus. That is the area it is providing attachment to the posterior attached margin, and it provides accommodation to the transverse sinus. Transverse, why it is called it is transversely arranged. You can see here this blue color, it is nothing but the transverse sinus. The transverse sinus, it is transversely arranged. That is why it is called transverse sinus. And next is the next sinus. It is here, this is the transverse sinus, and here in the posterior part, in the anterior part, this part, the lateral attached part, it is having attachment with the petrous part of the temporal bone. Here at this level, it is providing accommodation to the another dural venous sinus, that is superior petrosal sinus. Superior petrosal sinus, and you see here, this is the superior petrosal sinus. This is the area it is attached to the petrous part of the temporal bone, and in the posterior part, it is attached to the occipital bone, and this is called transverse sinus. These are the two dural venous sinuses. They are present in relation with the tentorium cerebelli, and in the middle, in between, at the junction of the falx cerebri with the tentorium cerebelli, it is also having relation with the straight sinus. Straight sinus. Okay, that is about the tentorium cerebelli. Here you can see this is the tentorium cerebelli. Okay, this is the two halves of the tentorium. This is the right and left halves of the tentorium cerebelli, and here this is the free anterior margin. This is U shape, and this is the posterior attached margin. Posterior attached margin. Here this is the straight sinus, and this is the superior petrosal sinus along the attachment of the petrous temporal bone, and this is the transverse sinus along the attachment to the occipital bone. Okay, these are all the three sinuses, and these are all the parts of the falx cerebri. Next come, sorry, tentorium cerebelli. Next come to the falx cerebelli. This falx cerebelli, it is a small fold of dura mater. You can see here. Okay, this one, very small fold. This is the falx cerebelli, small fold of dura mater. Okay, and here is a small sickle-shaped fold of dura mater at posterior cerebellar notch. What are the attachments of this falx cerebelli? That is the base. Here the upper part is wide. That is why it is called base, and lower part is pointed. It is called apex. This is the base. This is the apex. The base is attached to the inferior surface of the tentorium cerebelli. In the apex, actually here the apex splits into two parts, and then it attached to the margins of the foramina magnum. Attached to the margins of the foramina magnum. The posterior margin attached to internal occipital crest. The posterior margin, that means this is the posterior margin. Here, this is the posterior margin. It is attached to the internal occipital crest. And this is the site for the accommodation of occipital sinus. That is, this is one of the unpaid dural venous sinus. That is the occipital sinus. Occipital sinus. That is about the falx cerebelli. Next, coming to the last one, that is the another fold of dura mater. That is a horizontal fold of dura mater forms the roof of the hypophyseal fossa. You know, I think already you know what is hypophysis. That is nothing but the pituitary gland. It is accommodated or there is a fossa for the hypophysis cerebri over the body of the sphenoid bone, and it is also covered by a fold of dura mater that is called diaphragma sellae. Diaphragma sellae. Okay, and what are the attachments of the diaphragma sellae? Here, and within in the central part of the diaphragma sellae, there is a one gap. Through this gap, the talk of the hypophysis cerebri goes down, and the pituitary gland is accommodated over this body of the sphenoid bone. Okay, here the anteriorly the diaphragma sellae, it is attached to the tuberculum sellae. It is a small bony part, and posteriorly dorsum sellae. This is also a small bony part over the body of the sphenoid, and on both sides it continues with the dura of the middle cranial fossa. It continues on both sides, continues with the dura of the middle cranial fossa. Okay, that is the next. Through the central aperture, that is within the diaphragma sellae, there is a central aperture, there is opening. You can see here, this is the diaphragma sellae. This is the diaphragma sellae, and within this diaphragma sellae, here in the central part, there is a small opening. Through this opening, the pituitary gland goes down, and it is accommodated over the body of the sphenoid bone. Okay, that is the aperture. Okay. Next, coming to the, what is the blood supply to the duras? That is a for dura, especially dura, dural force. That is the endosteal layer is rich vascular. That is the endosteal layer of the dura mater is receiving rich blood supply, and meningeal layer is more fibrous and less blood supply. It is having less blood supply. And what are the different structures which are receiving blood supply from different areas? That is vault, that is from the middle meningeal artery, and anterior cranial fossa, it receives blood supply from the meningeal branches of the anterior ethmoidal artery, posterior ethmoidal artery, and ophthalmic arteries. These are all the arteries that are providing blood supply to the meninges, especially the dura of the anterior cranial fossa, and the middle cranial fossa dura, it is receiving blood supply from the middle meningeal, accessory meningeal, internal carotid artery, and ascending pharyngeal arteries. These are all the arteries coming from the neck into the cranial cavity. Especially, these are all supplying to the dura. And another one is the posterior cranial fossa. It is receiving, mostly it is receiving blood supply from the vertebral arteries, occipital arteries, and ascending pharyngeal arteries. Vertebral, occipital, and ascending pharyngeal arteries. These are the blood vessels. They are supplying blood to the posterior cranial fossa. Next, what are the nerves of this dura? That is also very, very important, because whenever there is an irritation of this dura or in meninges, it produces radiating pain over the distribution of the nerves. That is the dura of the vault, it is supplied by the ophthalmic nerve, and the anterior cranial fossa, it is by the anterior ethmoidal and maxillary nerves, and middle cranial fossa, it is receiving nerve supply from the maxillary mandibular divisions of the trigeminal nerve. And the posterior cranial fossa is from the recurrent branches of the C2, C3, and C9, and ninth and sorry, not C9, and C2, C3, and C1, C2, C3, and the 9th and 10th cranial nerves. That is the nerve supply. Okay. Next, coming to the another important topic related today, that is the dural venous sinuses. Dural venous sinuses. Clinically, these dural venous sinuses are very, very important, because the clinical conditions which are related with the dural venous sinuses, it leads to many problems related with the brain and cranial cavity. Okay, the dural venous sinuses, they are nothing but the venous spaces, walls of which formed by dura mater. That is especially the meningeal layer of the dura mater, or mostly they are in between the dura and meningeal layer and endosteal layer. The dural sinuses, they are between the, mostly they are between the two layers of the dura mater, that is endosteal layer and meningeal layer, and there is no muscle in the wall of the dural venous sinuses. They are lined by endothelium. They are lined by endothelium, and another specialty is there is no valves. There is no, usually we see in other parts of the body, we see there are valves in the veins, but here in the dural venous sinuses, there is no valves. And next is the venous sinuses receive venous blood from brain, meninges, and bones of the skull. That is from the diploic veins, and then meninges from the meninges and from the brain. And they communicate extracranially through the emissary veins. They are communicated with the extracranial veins through the emissary veins. And venous sinuses are paid and unpaid. Here, their communication between the internal and external, intracranial and extracranial veins through the emissary veins. These emissary veins are very, very important because whenever there is an increased intracranial tension or pressure, they try to compensate the pressure by shifting the blood outside through the emissary veins. And another disadvantage with these emissary veins is whenever there is an infection or that is outside the cranial cavity, that is in the scalp or in the face, there are more, because there is no valves. And because of this reason, there is a retrograde flow of blood from superficial to deep into the that is a dural venous sinuses, and it may leads to the development of complications, that is like say dural venous sinus thrombosis. That is the problem with the emissary veins. The venous sinuses are, we classified the venous sinuses as paid sinus and unpaid sinus. Paid sinus and unpaid sinus. Next, we see, first you see about the paid sinuses. What are the paid dural venous sinuses? That is, first one is the cavernous sinus, superior petrosal sinus, inferior petrosal sinus, transverse sinus, sigmoid sinus, sphenoparietal sinus, petrosquamous sinus, and middle meningeal veins. These are all the, these are 8 are paid dural venous sinuses. That is the cavernous sinus, superior petrosal sinus, inferior petrosal sinus, transverse, sigmoid, sphenoparietal sinus, petrosquamous sinus, and middle meningeal veins. These are all the paid dural venous sinuses. Okay. Next, to unpaid dural venous sinuses. That is just now we had seen, that is a superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus, straight sinus, occipital sinus. Along with this, there is a anterior intercavernous sinus and posterior intercavernous sinus. Anterior and posterior cavernous sinus, they are nothing but the communication between the two cavernous sinuses. That is right and left cavernous sinuses. They are communicated with each other with the help of the anterior and posterior intercavernous sinuses. They are also unpaid sinus. And another one is the basilar venous plexus of veins. Basilar venous plexus or basilar plexus of veins. These are all the 7 sinuses. They are unpaid dural venous sinuses. Unpaid dural venous sinuses. Here you can see, out of these sinuses, the superior sagittal sinus and cavernous sinus. Superior sagittal sinus and cavernous sinus, these are the 2 most important sinuses. And as sigmoid sinus is also clinically is important. We see in detail about the superior sagittal sinus and cavernous sinus. Here you see what you are seeing, the diagram. This is the superior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus. That is, this is the cranium. That is the bones of the cranium, and this is the pericranium, and this is the endocranium. And here this is the dura. Dura, it is again, it is divided into 2 layers. That is the, this is the endocranium, and this is the endosteal layer, and this is the meningeal layer. Here you see, this is the endosteal layer, and this is the meningeal layer. In between these 2 layers, there is a spaces, venous spaces. They are called dural venous sinuses. Dural venous sinuses, especially this is the superior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus. You see what you are seeing here. This is the superior sagittal sinus. Okay. Again, the coronal section of the superior sagittal sinus. This is the coronal section of the superior sagittal sinus. Here you can see it is receiving the tributaries. That is the, this is the vein is coming superficial cerebral vein because it is receiving blood from the brain. And here you can see this is the meningeal vein because the dural venous sinuses, they're also draining the meninges. And here again, this is also diploic vein, it is coming from the bones, and already you know what is diploid. That is within the cranial bones. There are the three parts. That is, outer is the table, inner table. In between these two tables, you see here there is a solid bone. This is the outer table, and this is the inner table. In between these two, this is the diploid. And within the diploid, there are blood vessels, and the vein which is present in the diploid, and it is coming from the diploid. You call it as diploic vein. It also drains into the dampen or a reservoir, so small dilated venous parts. They are called venous lacuna. Venous lacuna. All these, and another one is the emissary vein. Emissary vein, there is a communicating vein between the extracranial and intracranial soft parts of the brain. That is a head and neck. That is head, especially head. That is the emissary vein. And these are all the veins. They are draining into the superior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus. And here, the superior sagittal sinus, clinically also, the superior sagittal sinus is very, very important, because you see here there are prolongations from the arachnoid matter. These are the prolongations from the arachnoid matter. They are called arachnoid granulations. Arachnoid granulations. These arachnoid granulations are playing most important role in the absorption of the cerebrospinal fluid. That is, the CSF is absorbed. CSF is produced at the choroid plexus, that is in the lateral ventricles and third ventricles, by the filtration of the blood. And here it must be absorbed. After serving its function, it must be absorbed from the cavities. That function is performed by the arachnoid granulations. The arachnoid granulations, they are like a roots of the tree. They are absorbing the CSF from especially the superior sagittal sinus. Because of this reason, the superior sagittal sinus is very, very important, because through the communicating veins, especially the emissary veins or from the diploic veins, if there is any infecting material, or if there is any infection in the scalp, or if there is infection in the diploid of the bones, and there are more chances for the spreading of this infection through this communicating vein into the superior sagittal sinus. If there is a infection in the superior sagittal sinus and it leads to, the clinical condition is called dural venous sinus thrombosis. Okay, if there is a formation of this dural venous sinus thrombosis, and it leads to the occlusion of the blood flow, and at the same time occlusion of the CSF. The occlusion of the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, is more dangerous, because it leads to accumulation of CSF in the cranial cavities or ventricles of the brain, and it leads to a development of a clinical condition that is called hydrocephalus. The hydrocephalus is the most dangerous clinical condition. If it is not treated in time, it leads to compression over the surrounding brain, and it produces its own manifestations. And if it is not treated in time, it may cause compression further, and it may lead to the hanging, or there is a prolapse of the brainstem through the foramina magnum, and it leads to death of the patients. That is the most dangerous complication of the hydrocephalus, that is due to obstruction to the blood flow or venous drainage to the superior sagittal sinus. That is why the superior sagittal sinus is also clinically, it is very, very important clinically. Okay, next coming to the another sinus, that is the cavernous sinus. This is also very, very important, cavernous sinus. Why it is called cavernous sinus? That is also important, because if you see the cavernous sinus, in the cavernous sinus, there are trabeculae or reticular fibers or trabeculae that are passing through within this cavernous sinus. That is why it is called, and these trabeculae, they divide the cavity of the cavernous sinus into different segments, just like our sponge. That is why it is called cavernous sinus. This is the largest venous sinus, large venous sinus in the middle cranial fossa, and situated on each side of the body of the sphenoid bone, and interior is divided into spaces by the reticular trabeculae. The floor that is, if it is formed by endosteal layer, roof, lateral and medial walls formed by meningeal layers, and it measures about 2 centimeters long and 1 centimeter in breadth. Here you can see this is the cavernous sinus. Cavernous sinus. Okay, and this is the roof, and this is the floor, and this is the medial wall, and this is the lateral wall. These are the boundaries of the cavernous sinus. And next, what are the relations of the cavernous sinus? That is also important. Anteriorly, it is related with the superior orbital fissure. That is I show you next diagram. Okay, this you see here. This is the anterior part, and this is the superior orbital fissure. It is anteriorly, it is related to the superior orbital fissure, and posteriorly, it is related with the apex of the petrous part of the temporal bone and crus cerebri. And superiorly, it is related above the cavernous sinus. There is a optic tract, optic chiasma, internal carotid artery, anterior perforated substance. These are all the structures superiorly. And inferiorly, it is related with the foramen caecum, junction of the body and greater wing of the sphenoid bone. And medially, it is related with the hypophysis cerebri, sphenoidal air sinuses. Sphenoidal air sinuses. Okay, you see here. You see, these are the relations. Okay, this is the sphenoidal. These are the sphenoidal air sinuses, and this is the fossa for the hypophysis cerebri. Hypophysis cerebri, and this total is the body of the sphenoid bone. Body of the sphenoid bone. Okay, next, laterally by the temporal lobe of the brain and uncus. That is a part of the brain, uncus and temporal lobe of the brain. These are the parts, relations of the cavernous sinus. Next, tributaries. What are the different tributaries which are opening into the cavernous sinus? That is also very important. That is, the first one is the superior ophthalmic vein, inferior ophthalmic vein, central vein of retina, superficial middle cerebral vein, inferior cerebral vein, sphenoparietal sinus, and middle meningeal vein, anterior trunk. These are all the tributaries. And next, communications. What are the communications of the cavernous sinus? This is also very, very important clinically. Because of these communications, there are more chances for spreading of infection from the cavernous sinus, from the peripheral parts into the cavernous sinus, and it may lead to a clinical condition that is called cavernous sinus venous thrombosis. That is CSVT, cavernous sinus venous thrombosis. This is the most dangerous clinical condition we discuss later. Okay, transverse sinus, that is the, it is communicated with the transverse sinus through the superior petrosal sinus, and it is also communicated with the sigmoid sinus through the inferior petrosal sinus, and pterygoid venous fluxus. Pterygoid fluxus of veins also communicated through the emissary veins, and it is also communicated with the facial vein. Already we discussed in the last class, the facial vein is communicated with the cavernous sinus, that is through the superior ophthalmic vein, angular vein, pterygoid plexus, and deep facial veins. And that is why that lower part of the nose and upper lip, this area you call it as dangerous area of the face, because any infection in this area, there are more chances for spreading of this infection in the retrograde direction, and it may lead to the development of that is cavernous sinus venous thrombosis. That is why this is very, very important. Next, coming to the another one, that is the anterior intercavernous sinus and posterior intercavernous sinus. That is in between the anterior two cavernous sinuses, that is right hand cavernous sinus. There is a communication that is called anterior and posterior intercavernous sinuses. And superior sagittal sinus is also communicated through the superficial middle cerebral vein. Okay, you see, these are all the communications. These are all the, okay, see, this is the cavernous sinus. From here to here, this is the cavernous sinus. The length of the cavernous sinus is 2 centimeters, and the breadth is only 1 centimeter. The length is 2 centimeters and breadth is 1 centimeter. This is the left cavernous sinus. This is the right cavernous sinus. There are two cavernous sinus. Okay, in between these two cavernous sinus, these are the intercavernous sinus, anterior and posterior intercavernous sinus veins. And these are all the veins which are having relation, communication with the cavernous sinus. That is, you see, this is the superior ophthalmic vein. Okay, this is the inferior ophthalmic vein, and this is the sphenoparietal vein, and superficial cerebral vein, middle cerebral vein, and inferior cerebral vein. Okay, these are all the veins, and it is they are having communication with the this cavernous sinus, and these are the middle meningeal sinuses, middle meningeal vessels, and this is the okay. Next, the cavernous sinus, it is communicated posteriorly with the this sigmoid sinus and transverse sinus. Okay, you can see here, this is the communication between the sigmoid sinus, that is in the form of superior petrosal sinus, and this is the inferior petrosal vein sinus. It is communicated with the transverse sinus. Okay, and here this is the basilar flexus of veins. Basilar flexus of veins. Okay, these are all the different structures which are related with the cavernous sinus. And next, another important relation here, another important point. There are some important structures, they are passing through the cavernous sinus. That is also very, very important clinically, because suppose if you see the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, that is internal jugular, that is medial wall of the internal cavernous sinus, that is internal jugular vein, and abducens nerve, the sixth cranial nerve. These two nerves, they are passing through the cavernous sinus, and this internal carotid artery, it is surrounded by a sympathetic nerve plexus along with the small veins, and this abducens nerve is also passing through the cavernous sinus, especially the medial wall of the cavernous sinus. This is very, very important, because you see here, this is the internal carotid artery, and this is the abducens nerve, and this is the surrounding this internal carotid artery. This is the sympathetic plexus of nerves. Okay, and they are separated from the cavernous sinus with the help of the endothelium. The help of the endothelium, and here it is coming into the cavernous sinus. Then it is going into the through the cavernous sinus in the medial wall. Then it goes anteriorly. Again, it is turned upwards, and you can see here, it turns upwards, and it is having superior relation with the internal cavernous sinus. And here at this area, it is forming a bend. This is the bend. This bend is very, very important. This is called carotid siphon. Carotid siphon. This carotid siphon, it is playing most important role clinically, because here, up to here, the blood is coming with high pressure, and it dampens the blood, and it regulates the blood flow to the cerebrum through the anterior and middle cerebral veins. And because of the presence of this bend, the blood flow pressure is regulated. That is the most important function of the carotid siphon. And next, another important function is this bend must be maintained. Suppose if there is a, here you see, this is the hypophysis pituitary gland. If there is a development of the pituitary tumors, they are very closely related with the internal carotid artery. Because of this reason, there is a change in the bend of this carotid siphon. It may be widened. If there is a widening of the, suppose if you take the cerebral arteriogram or angiogram, in the angiogram, if you find the widening of the carotid siphon, that indicates there is some tumor related with the hypophysis cerebri, and it is compressing over the cavernous, this carotid siphon. That is why this is the other important clinical point. Next, another one is here you see this internal carotid artery within the cavernous sinus. It is very closely related with the base of the skull. Base of the skull, and this is the endosteal lining, and this is the very closely related with the base of the skull. And here, if there is any road traffic accidents during head injury, if there is a chances, more chances for the fracture of the skull bones, and it leads to damage or rupture of the internal carotid artery, and it leads to formation of fistula between the internal carotid artery and the cavernous sinus. That is called arteriovenous fistula, and it may lead to a clinical condition that is called pulsating exophthalmos. Pulsating, because here this artery, it is a pressure may, it is communicate, the internal carotid artery, cavernous sinus, it is communicated with the orbit through the superior orbital fissure. Because of this reason, the pressure may be on the orbit, and it leads to protrusion of the eyeball. Protrusion of the eyeball anteriorly, that is called exophthalmos, and at the same time pulsating exophthalmos. That is very, very important, because whenever there is a pulsations in the heart, because of the heart systole and diastole, the eyeball also moves like this. That is called pulsating exophthalmos. Okay, this is also most important clinical condition. And here, and at the same time, you can hear the, if you put the stethoscope on the temporal bone, you can hear the murmur. That is the murmur. You can hear the, you are able to elicit the murmur or the temporal bone. That is the most diagnostic point related with the fracture of the base of the skull, and there is a formation of arteriovenous fistula. Okay, that is the another important point related with the relation with the internal carotid artery with the cavernous sinus. And next, coming to the another relations, that is the lateral wall. The lateral wall, that is there are four nerves that are having relation with the lateral wall. That is the oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, that is third and fourth cranial nerves, ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal nerve, that is the branch of the fifth cranial nerve, and maxillary branches of the ophthalmic and maxillary branches of the cranial nerve. That is, you can see here, these are the nerves which are having relation with the lateral wall. That is, this is the oculomotor nerve, this is the trochlear nerve, this is the ophthalmic nerve, and this is the maxillary nerve. All these nerves, they are having relation with the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, and it is separated from the cavernous sinus by the endothelium. The endothelial lining, it separates the nerves from the cavernous sinus. Whenever there is a formation of a CSVT, that is cavernous sinus venous thrombosis, it leads to increased pressure within the cavernous sinus due to obstruction to the blood flow, and it may produce compression over all these nerves which are having relation with the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, and it leads to produce pain, excruciating pain along the distribution of these nerves. That is why this is very, very, very important. And another important thing you can see here, another important relay along with the internal carotid artery, there is a one nerve, that is the abducens nerve. This is the sixth cranial nerve. Here, whenever there is a cavernous sinus thrombosis or any damage to this one, it may lead to abducens palsy. The abducens palsy, and this is the nerve, it is supplying to the lateral rectus of the eyeball. Extraocular muscles, among the extraocular muscles, there is a one muscle, that is the lateral rectus. It is supplied by the abducens nerve. There is a sixth cranial nerve, and whenever there is a compression or damage to this abducens nerve at the level of the cavernous sinus, it leads to the paralysis of the lateral rectus muscle, and it leads to deviation of the eyeball towards the medial side, and it produces squint or double vision. That is another important clinical relation. Next, coming to the another point, that is factors which are regulating the blood flow. That is expansile pulsations of the internal carotid artery. They regulate the blood flow to the cavernous sinus, and by the gravity and changes of the position of the head. These are all the things which are regulating the blood flow through the cavernous sinus. Okay, that is the thing related with the cavernous sinus, that name the dural venous sinuses, that is paid and unpaid dural venous sinuses, and write in detail about the superior sagittal sinus or cavernous sinus they mask. This is very, very important question. Among the dural folds, that is the falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli, these are the two most important short answer questions. You must be very careful with the all the things we discussed till. Okay, that is the take home messages. That is the first is the cranial cavity. It is divided into two parts, that is anterior, middle, and posterior cranial fossa. And next is the layers which are lining the cranial cavity. That is first one is the outermost one is the dura, and next is the arachnoid matter and pia matter. Here another one important thing, above the dura mater, there is no space, there is no epidural space, but only in between the bones and dura, there are blood vessels that are passing. Whenever there is a fracture over the skull, and it may leads to damage to this meningeal vessel, especially the meningeal vessels, middle meningeal vessels. They may damage and they may produce the leaking of blood in between the bone and the that is endosteal layer of the dura, and it leads to a clinical condition that is called extradural hemorrhage. Extradural hemorrhage, and this extradural hemorrhage mostly it is slow in prognosis. Immediately after the accident, the patient may feel happy, and but over a period of time, slowly there is accumulation of blood, and this extradural hemorrhage it may compress over the area of the affection, and it may compress the brain, and it leads to slow development of symptoms like giddiness, vomitings, headache, and finally the person may develop convulsions. That is why this is the extradural hemorrhage. Another one is the subdural hemorrhage. That is there is no subdural, usually there is no subdural space because the arachnoid matter and subdural, there are very thin film of fluid is there, and whenever there is a damage to this one, they may produce subdural hemorrhage, and the subdural hemorrhage and subarachnoid hemorrhage. Subarachnoid hemorrhage is also most common clinical conditions. And in the difference between the subdural hemorrhage and subarachnoid hemorrhage is a subdural hemorrhage, most of the occasions it is due to venous damage. That is the damage of the veins below the dura, and subarachnoid hemorrhage, mostly it is related with the arteries of the brain which are supplying, and whenever there is an increased blood pressure, abnormal control, there is no control over the blood pressure, and it leads to rupture of the blood vessels, especially arteries, it may lead to subarachnoid hemorrhage. Okay, these are also most important clinical conditions. And apart from this, that is superior sagittal sinus, and there is thrombosis, and it leads to, mostly it leads, and sometimes there may be chances for the thrombosis in the sigmoid sinus, because the sigmoid sinus, it is having relation, very close relation, anteriorly it is very close related with the that is a mastoid air cells or mastoid antrum. This mastoid antrum, it may get infected through the middle ear, because the middle ear and cavity and a mastoid antrum, they are having close relation, and they are having relation through the mastoid antrum. The infection may spread into this sigmoid sinus, and it also leads to formation of thrombus, and it also leads to obstruction to the cerebrospinal fluid, the CSF, and it leads to formation of hydrocephalus. And here, and in the cavernous sinus, that is CSVT, this is the most common clinical condition. It is producing excruciating pain and pulsating eyeball, that is due to damage to the internal carotid artery at the level of the cavernous sinus. Okay, and some other clinical conditions, that is compression over the nerves, they leads to, that is they produce pain over the distribution of all the nerves which are having relation with the cavernous sinus. Because of all these, another one important point, sometimes there may be in the anterior part of the cranial cavity, there is a one extra opening here, the foramen caecum. Through this foramen caecum, the superior sagittal sinus may have communicated with the veins of the nose, and it is also one of the route for the transmission or spreading of infection from the nose into the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, these are all the things you must remember. Clinically, these dural venous sinuses and folds of dura mater is very, very important. You must be careful. Okay, thank you. Any doubts? Okay, you read carefully along with you practice the diagrams. If any doubt, we discuss later. Okay, thank you. Sir, Girish పిలవండి సార్. తెలియదు, మనకి ఐడియా లేదు సార్. ఉందండి బాబు.
నాకు తెలిసిందల్లా superior science
ఇది చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్ సార్, అందుకని నేను బాగా సీరియస్ గా ప్రిపేర్ అయ్యాను.
applied aspect.
లేకపోతే పిల్లలకి అర్థం కాదు, అప్లైడ్ ఆస్పెక్ట్ చెప్పకపోతే వాళ్ళకి సీరియస్నెస్ తెలియదు సార్. అయిపోయింది, సైన్ అవుట్ చేసి. ఎక్కడికి వెళ్ళాడు గిరీష్?
ఉన్నాడు సార్.
అమ్మని చెప్పండి, మళ్ళీ సేవ్ చేయాలి కదా, అంతా అంతా షేర్ చేయాలి, రికార్డ్ చేసి షేర్ చేస్తారు.
Even a patient so badly damaged, injured, after that,